Patsy Parisi and Christopher Moltisanti don't hate each other in the loud, explosive way the show usually delivers beef. Because their problem isn't one big incident, it's a slow build of distrust that sits underneath every sit-down, every envelope, every little moment where someone gets treated like they earned a seat at the table when they really got it handed to them. On paper, they should get along. They are both soldiers under the same boss, both capable, both useful, both the kind of guys you keep around because they can get things done without needing a whole committee meeting. But in practice, they're almost built to clash because they come from two different Sopranos worlds that never fully merge. Patsy comes from the older, colder world, where you keep your feelings in your pocket and you survive by being steady. Christopher comes from the newer, hotter world where you want recognition now, you want your credit now, and if you do not get it, you start acting out like the whole system is personally insulting you. That difference sounds small until you put them in the same crew, under the same boss, in a family where status matters more than money sometimes, and where disrespect is treated like a physical attack. Then it turns into something real. The first thing to understand is that Patsy is a survivor of a very specific kind. He isn't just quiet. He is quiet because he learned what noise costs. His twin brother gets killed on Tony's orders, and that fact sits at the center of Patsy's entire vibe for the rest of the series. The show doesn't let you forget it. You see him grieving, you see him swallowing it, you see him doing the one thing that makes him human again, which is peeing in Tony's pool like a teenager trying to feel power in the only safe way he can. And then you see the scariest part of Patsy, the part people miss if they only label him as the accountant type. He goes to Tony's house with a gun. He is close enough. He is angry enough. And he still doesn't do it. That moment is Patsy in one scene. He can kill. He can also stop himself. He can let the anger pass because he understands the full cost of pulling that trigger. He sees the family inside. He sees the life around Tony. And he makes a choice that is bigger than pride. That choice is basically his whole philosophy afterward. Live, earn, stay steady. Don't become the guy who throws his whole future away to prove a point for 5 seconds. Christopher is almost the opposite. Christopher can also be steady sometimes, but he is emotionally wired to take things personally, and he is constantly testing the room to see if people respect him the way he believes he deserves. When he does not feel respected, he spirals. When he feels overlooked, he takes it as betrayal. When he feels embarrassed, he gets dangerous. That's not even a moral judgment, it's just the pattern the show repeats. Christopher's entire arc is him wanting to be taken seriously while also doing things that make serious people not trust him. The drugs, the impulsiveness, the need to be seen as important, the way he wants the status of being Tony's chosen guy without always having the patience and discipline that the older generation values. So when you ask what their relationship is, it's basically this. They are co-workers in a violent company where trust is everything, and neither man sees the other as the kind of person you can truly trust. Patsy looks at Christopher and sees risk. Not just, he might mess up a score, but the deeper risk. The kind of risk that brings heat, flips people, creates chaos, drags everybody into problems they didn't create. Christopher is talented, but he is also volatile. He is the guy who can have a good week and then ruin it with one stupid move because he is offended, high, insecure, or trying to prove something. Patsy is the kind of guy who has been around long enough to know the difference between a man who earns and a man who earns until he blows up your whole operation. Patsy values predictability because predictability keeps you out of prison and keeps your money coming in. Christopher looks at Patsy and sees something else. He sees a guy who will never clap for him. He sees a guy who is unimpressed. He sees a guy who isn't scared of his Tony's favorite, or the way some of the younger guys might be. And that drives Christopher crazy because Christopher's biggest insecurity is that deep down, he thinks people see him as a kid playing gangster, a nepotism project, a guy who got promoted faster than he should have because Tony loves him, not because the room chose him. And here's where the dislike really becomes logical instead of just personality-based. In the Sopranos world, your rank is not just about money, it's about legitimacy. Patsy's legitimacy is old school. He's been around. He's been tested by loss. He swallowed the hardest betrayal possible and stayed in line. That's a terrible thing to admire, but in their culture it counts. It proves you can take pain and still function. Christopher's legitimacy is complicated. He earns. He's violent. He's capable. But he is also the boss's guy. He rises fast. He gets protected. He gets forgiven. Even when he messes up, he gets another chance. That kind of favoritism is poison in a crew full of men who measure respect like oxygen. So why do they dislike each other? Because each one is a walking reminder of how unfair the system is. To Patsy, Christopher is the reminder that Tony doesn't run things like a clean meritocracy. He runs things like a family business where blood and emotion distort the rules. That matters to Patsy because Tony already distorted the rules when he decided Patsy's twin brother had to go. Patsy swallowed it, but he did not forget what it says about the boss. It says your life is always conditional. It says loyalty doesn't protect you. It says the boss will do what he wants and then tell you to accept it like it's weather. Now put Christopher into that picture. Christopher is living proof that Tony can be sentimental, that Tony can protect someone, that Tony can treat one guy like an heir while treating another guy's family like disposable parts. Even if Patsy never says that out loud, you can feel it in the way a man like him would read the room. He'd look at Christopher and think, so that's what special treatment looks like. That's what mercy looks like. That's what forgiveness looks like. Funny how it never showed up when it was my family on the table. Meanwhile, to Christopher, Patsy represents the cold jury in the room. The older guys who don't say much but judge everything. The guys who survived long enough to not be impressed by a young man's temper. Christopher wants validation. He wants the crew to look at him like he is the future. Patsy is not built to give that. Patsy gives respect in a different currency. He gives it through cooperation, through quiet compliance, through doing business without drama. That kind of respect feels invisible to a guy like Christopher, because Christopher wants the emotional version. He wants acknowledgement, praise, loyalty with a smile. Patsy will hand you an envelope and keep his face blank. That emptiness feels like disrespect to Christopher. There's also a practical business layer to it that matters just as much as psychology. Patsy is the kind of guy who handles money, collections, structure, the boring parts that actually keep the family alive. Christopher is the kind of guy who wants the exciting parts and the recognition parts. When those two types work together, they can be deadly efficient, but only if the ego guy respects the steady guy and the steady guy trusts the ego guy not to torch everything. They don't have that. Christopher's reputation for being erratic is not gossip. It's a consistent issue. Even when he tries to get his life together, the crew does not stop treating him like a problem. And the crew is not totally wrong. Because in their world, a problem is not a moral label, it's a survival label. A guy who might relapse, who might get emotional, who might draw attention, who might become unreliable, that guy is a problem no matter how talented he is. Patsy is smart enough to see that the biggest danger to their business is not always an outside enemy. Sometimes it's the guy sitting next to you at the Bing who can't control himself. And Christopher can sense that judgment. He can sense when people don't fully trust him. That makes him worse, because now he is not just dealing with his own demons, he is dealing with humiliation. Christopher hates humiliation more than he hates pain. You can hurt him and he will survive, but embarrass him. Make him feel small, make him feel like the room thinks he's a joke, and he starts acting like he has to restore his name with violence. Patsy does not play that game. Patsy restored his name by not dying. That's why they don't speak the same language. Another key reason their relationship stays strained is Tony himself. Tony uses people like pieces, and sometimes he does it without even noticing the emotional damage because he is focused on control. Tony elevates Christopher, and whether he says it directly or not, that elevation forces older guys to take orders from someone they don't view as their equal. In mafia terms, that is humiliating. In Soprano's terms, it's also dangerous because humiliation creates resentment, and resentment creates betrayal. Patsy is exactly the kind of man who would feel that and never show it. That's the part that makes him scary, and it's also the part that makes Christopher uneasy around him. Christopher can deal with obvious enemies. He can deal with a guy who yells, a guy who threatens, a guy who makes it clear they got a problem. He struggles with the quiet type because the quiet type can be thinking anything, and you won't see it coming until it's too late. Patsy is calm, polite, cooperative, and that is not comforting in their world. That is the mask of a man who learned how to hide his real feelings after being forced to swallow the murder of his twin. So Christopher likely reads Patsy the way you'd read a closed door in a burning building. It might be safe. It might be the way out. Or it might be hiding the fire. You don't know until you put your hand on it. Then there's the social layer, the way their worlds brush against Tony's real family life. Christopher is always half in, half out of Tony's domestic circle. He wants to be the heir, the son, the chosen one. That makes him sensitive to anyone else getting close to Tony in a family way. Patsy later becomes connected through his son dating Meadow. That kind of connection isn't the same as blood, but in the Sopranos universe it matters because it creates loyalty chains outside the business. It creates a future where Patsy isn't just a soldier, he's family adjacent. To a guy like Christopher, who is obsessed with being Tony's special one, that kind of quiet closeness can feel like competition, even if nobody says it is. It's another reason the relationship never warms up. Christopher doesn't only compete for money, he competes for position in Tony's emotional universe. Patsy is not trying to compete, but he is the kind of man who accidentally wins ground by being stable. And stability is something Tony craves and resents at the same time. Christopher is chaos, but he is Tony's chaos. Patsy is calm, but he is calm in a way that reminds Tony of the people he betrayed and the people he hurt. Tony can handle Christopher's mess because it feels familiar. It feels like family dysfunction. Patsy's calm is harder because it's adult. It's consequence. It's the kind of quiet that says, I know what you did, and I'm still here. Now, the question is, do Patsy and Christopher actually dislike each other openly? Or is it more of a cold distance that fans interpret? It's more the second, but the dislike is still real. The Sopranos is full of relationships that don't need big scenes to be true. A lot of the deepest hatred in that show is quiet because quiet hatred lasts longer. And with Patsy and Christopher, the dislike sits in their type mismatch. Christopher wants to be seen as important. Patsy wants to be left alone to earn. Christopher interprets silence as disrespect. Patsy uses silence as discipline. Christopher uses intimidation to demand loyalty. Patsy gives loyalty when it makes strategic sense, not when someone demands it like a tantrum. Christopher is emotional and reactive. Patsy is measured and patient. Most importantly, Christopher believes loyalty should be rewarded with warmth and protection. Patsy already learned loyalty does not guarantee either of those things, so he doesn't romanticize it. That last point is huge because it changes how they view Tony, and your view of the boss determines how you treat the boss's favorite. Christopher looks at Tony like a father figure he can never fully please. That creates a desperate kind of loyalty that turns toxic when he feels rejected. Patsy looks at Tony like a boss who already proved he will kill your blood if it benefits him. That creates a detached kind of loyalty that turns dangerous only when the math changes. So when Christopher gets favored, Patsy doesn't feel inspired. He feels reminded. And when Patsy stays calm, Christopher doesn't feel reassured. He feels judged. You can also see their difference in how they handle the idea of the life itself. Christopher wants the life to mean something. He wants it to have rules that feel fair. He wants to believe there is a ladder and he's climbing it. That's why he gets so angry when he feels disrespected, because disrespect tells him the ladder is fake. Patsy already knows the ladder is fake. Patsy knows the whole thing is vibes, power, timing, and who the boss likes today. He adapted to that reality by becoming useful and quiet. He doesn't fight the unfairness, he navigates it. So when Christopher storms around trying to force respect, Patsy probably sees a kid trying to punch the ocean. And that kind of attitude is insulting to Christopher, because Christopher needs to believe his fight matters. That's the tragedy of it. Their dislike isn't really about personal insults or one specific score. It's about worldview. And in The Sopranos, worldview is everything, because it decides whether you live. If you want the cleanest way to sum up their relationship, it's this. Patsy is the man who learned to survive Tony. Christopher is the man who tried to be loved by Tony. Those are two completely different missions. And when two guys are standing in the same room with two different missions, they can cooperate, but they will never truly trust each other. Because Patsy is always thinking, will this guy ruin us? And Christopher is always thinking, does this guy think I'm a joke? In a normal workplace, that's just tension. In their workplace, that's the seed of death. And even though the show doesn't give them a signature rivalry like some other pairings, it doesn't need to. The Sopranos is a story about how small resentments stack up until they become permanent. Patsy and Christopher are a perfect example of that. One is a quiet ledger of pain and patience. The other is a loud demand to be taken seriously. Put them under one boss who plays favorites, put them in a culture where disrespect is unforgivable, and the result is simple. They don't have to explode to dislike each other. They just have to keep working in the same room year after year, knowing exactly what the other one represents.